to third wave AI. So uh, I think before we talk about what third wave is, we should probably just talk about what AI is capable of doing. And this is a pretty bold statement, but it is fair and accurate, which is that AI is killing a generation of businesses while those making AI investments are actually seeing multiple returns on their investment. And a really good or easy case study for people to wrap their heads around is an insurance company that just IPO'd maybe a month or two ago. They're called Lemonade, and they are using AI to do their underwriting. And essentially, compared to their competitors, Allstate, State Farm, Liberty Mutual, all of them, on average, Lemonade is able to create the same product for 68% cheaper than their competitors on average. This is a very remarkable phenomenon. If you think about, your competitor that's able to now do something less than half the cost that it took you to do, you might be a little concerned about what that means for them driving the price down, people switching because of the competition. And that's exactly what's happening within the insurance arena right now. There's a lot of people that are particularly concerned about how this is going to impact their business, and maybe now they're just now thinking we should think about AI, and that's something that it may be too little, too late. We don't know, right? But we'll see as this continues to move forward. So let's talk about the four waves of AI just really quickly. So the first wave was, think Kasparov and Deep Blue. It was good at a singular task, and it was also good at kind of understanding rules and how to follow those rules, but not go beyond that. The second wave would be something closer to Go, the algorithm that that company created that was able to beat the Go player, which is a much more complex game than chess. But also maybe like Pandora was using second wave AI, and or like that was a competitor to Spotify. But like the idea is that you have to like a lot of songs, and even then you might still get some songs you don't really like, which is challenging. And I think that's because it requires a lot of rules and a lot of training. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk more about third wave in a second, but the big differentiator here is that it's able to reduce the barriers of entry and increase the quality by the way that data is trained in that model. And then fourth wave, Star Trek kind of stuff where you talk to a computer and it understands you seamlessly and is able to then be able to produce something of value to you in a very short order. So third wave AI really reduces or mitigates the need for extensive training by relying on something that we're calling expert knowledge to simplify kind of the core concepts here. Earlier AI models, like the first and second gen, were using trial and error. This means that if you were to talk to even an AI shop, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, they would say, okay, give us 1 million data points that have been highly curated, and we're going to have to label each one as, this is what a tumor is, and this is not what a tumor is. And you kind of have to go through that exercise thousands or millions of times to properly train a model. This was one of the roadblocks of second wave AI a few years ago, and why the adoption curve for AI was really slow. Third wave relies upon expert decision making and intelligent frameworks so that you don't have to necessarily create these laborious kind of labeled data sets that have been munged or cleaned to a point where you're able to kind of move forward. And a great example here, maybe just like in this little picture you can see on the right in the lower right corner, there's a man riding a motorcycle, or a person riding a motorcycle. And the way that the third wave AI, or like a deep neural network, would approach this is to say, I can see the person, I can see the bike. Those things are really easy. They were done in second gen too. The thing that's different here is that you can say, okay, the algorithm understands that a person can ride a bike or a motorcycle, and it sees a bike or a motorcycle, and it understands that's a rideable object. And it can understand that if there is a person above a rideable object, it is very probabilistically true that that person is now riding a motorcycle. And so this is kind of just a simplified example on how this could translate into a very simple training exercise for this model to then understand that people riding motorcycles will have this particular designation associated to them. You don't need a bunch of motorcycle pictures. You don't need a bunch of people pictures. And a lot of that can be done right out of the box nowadays. So let's look at how industry is leveraging AI, and we see it across every industry. These are non-confidential examples. Pending AI is using basically, and other chemical products to predict properties of novel compounds without physical synthesis. And I got to say, as an organic chemist, I really do wish this technology was around when I was in grad school, although I'm not sure my professor would have even allowed it, even if it was. So Siemens or other advanced manufacturers are looking at ways to reduce lost time and incidents by detecting safety hazards before they actually cause accidents. You can see that lathe or whatever's going on, and you understand that it's going to cause a problem in the near future. You shut down the machine, or the proper PPE is not being used. There's a lot of ways that AI can be leveraged in that capacity. Food and beverage, such as Benson Hill, is using AI to detect products that don't meet the quality requirements, even on variable types of products like produce and meat that already are pretty ill-defined in terms of what the right product looks like versus maybe what the wrong product looks like. AI can be quickly trained to understand the threshold for quality requirements there. Highmark's financial investigations team basically saved $250 million in fraud and waste and abuse just last year using AI to predict these particular types of events. This is also something that a lot of financial portions of organizations could leverage as well. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be in R&D. There are HS2 or other similar infrastructure providers are using AI to basically automatically curate hours of drone inspection data down to the most salient and relevant areas and draw conclusions based on it, versus the alternative, which is having people sit and watch hours of drone data and do the same thing. So you're saving overhead, and you're also making those people that have much higher value to the organization work on strategic implementations or other concepts around the data, as opposed to scraping the data essentially and making conclusions based on that. The last one here, IBM obviously has been implementing AI for a while, and over the past decade they've realized $1 billion in savings. And this is the most interesting thing to me, is that it wasn't in anywhere that I would have thought this money would have been saved. It was actually in their HR department on modernization efforts that they have been putting forth. So you think about AI and really its capabilities, and what we're seeing here is that it doesn't have to be in R&D, it doesn't have to be at the cutting edge of the technology or the products that are being developed. It can really be anywhere in the organization. It just takes kind of people that are willing to investigate how this could actually impact their business, to understand the dimensionality of the technology and where it can be applied. So we're back to our 3 case studies on for the 3 areas and sectors that we're thinking about and how that would work. So with healthcare, if we were to potentially use third wave AI, we could or would say that this could be used to predict now an immunological response. Before, we were talking about it, kind of pulling data and making simulations, but those are all relevant steps. Now we're actually able to say, we can predict when this patient is going to have an immunological response. Manufacturing this is again taking the data maybe provided from the digital twin or in conjunction with the digital twin, and creating a predictive maintenance schedule so that you don't run into a situation where you're going to have downtime on the machinery. You proactively schedule it against data that is going to provide the highest uptime while reducing any unscheduled maintenance. And with the CPG and food and bev space, this is an interesting utilization of AI, which is that primarily what we're seeing AI in that particular zone for is marketing and marketing driven initiatives, where they can use AI tools leveraging data sets that are available or can be procured to identify consumer needs and predict the highest ROI market opportunities that are out there. Caitlin?
Great. Thanks, Ashish. Before we move into that next trend that I know you are going to speak on, we do have two audience questions that I'd love to address. The first is from Sonja, who says, I've heard of a cultural and other bias still being present in AI, especially in regards to healthcare. Would you be able to address that?
That's a really good question. It does exist, and there is, I will say that the current models that we have explored currently do have limitations, and that's something we'll kind of speak to towards the end of this chat. But I do believe that cultural limitations and other biases do exist within AI. And so my core takeaway from this is be pragmatic with the limitations of the technology that you're trying to do. Don't overstep or don't kind of extrapolate on something that a model tells you is truth when your human intuition might be able to tell you something different. So I would say in model, do not trust completely, but you can trust that it's providing a probabilistic score on something that it sees that you may not see. It's a great question. I would love to speak about that at much greater lengths.
Great. And we do have Wolfgang on the line who has their hand raised. I'm going to allow you to talk. Wolfgang, if you want to ask your question.